So welcome and thank you for joining us and your interest in our work. We've been working together as a project that crosses between the Idaho Food Bank and Boise State in our process management lab. And we've been working with the food bank to help them improve their food flow. And I'm here today with my colleagues. Randy Ford, who's with the food bank. Do you want to introduce yourself, Randy?
Yes, I'm Randy Ford. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Idaho Food Bank. Had the pleasure of working with these gentlemen along with their other colleagues that have helped with the process mapping over the course of the past almost year now at the food bank. So happy to help present and answer questions in whatever way I can.
And I'm also here with Dr. Rob Anson. Rob, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, Rob Anson. I was at Boise State. I'm an emeritus now. So I was in the College of Business versus Engineering for Steve. And but I've been doing facilitation and for 30 years as part of my actual dissertation initially, and then ever since I've been facilitating meetings and doing that with technology and with various technologies over the decades. So happy to be here.
And I'm Steve Villachica. I'm with Boise State University as well. And Rob and I have been working together and with the food bank since on this particular effort since February of 2020. And before that, we also have been working with the food bank because they are strategic partners for our academic courses. And we have a course in needs assessment and a course in instructional design, and the food bank has been clients for those projects over a number of years. Rob, next slide. To give you a little background, Idaho is the second fastest growing state in the United States. And with an increasing number of neighbors, there's an increasing amount of food insecurity. And then came COVID. The food bank has a central warehouse in Boise, the big star, and satellite warehouses in Lewiston to the north and Pocatello to the east. And given COVID, Feeding America provided these projections for 2021 for the state of Idaho. Randy, do you want to update any of that?
No, we've as far as the Feeding America, we use that on a yearly basis to do our strategic planning around how we're going to serve the state and do that in the most equitable manner possible. And really that's been a focus of trying to get more food to these rural areas. And that's what kind of precipitated the need for the branches, and then also the use of our partners, which we spend a tremendous amount of time advocating for. We have 465 partners statewide that we distribute food with and through. And then we also do backpack programs for kids in school, as well as school pantries. And then we do senior citizen food boxes, as well as emergency food assistance for the state. And so we have a large representation across the state, and we just we hope to one day be out of a job, honestly.
That'd be a marvelous world.
It would be.
And so there are there's the main headquarters and there are two satellite operations, but among all of them, they cover statewide. Next slide, Rob. Rob and I have been working together for a while, and our latest work together has been forming what we're calling the Process Management Lab. Our mission is to work with nonprofit organizations like the food bank to provide affordable services and expertise from the university to our local community members. And we envisioned, we do this because our vision is an environment where nonprofits have the infrastructure they need to meet their missions. Towards that end, we have set up a capability to plan and set a redesign direction. We work with our clients to redesign processes. Each process we investigate tends to have two parts. There's an as-is process, the way you're doing things now. There's also a to-be process, which is the way that the process could be improved to work in the future. Coming out of that are process maps and their improvement, which are flow charts depicting how activities occur. Disconnects, which are pain points or breaks in the process. If you're from a performance improvement background, they're performance gaps. Stuff is supposed to work, it isn't. In addition to those disconnects, participants create solutions addressing the disconnects. That's normally where a lot of this process improvement stuff stops. Here's your map, good luck. We've been really lucky because as part of the lab, we wanted to include support for making those redesigns happen. So we also work with our food bank client to help them manage the implementation of those solutions, as well as helping them direct the culture change in the organization. Because process mapping is one of those intrusive things that gets in people's faces, and it changes the roles people have in organizations and the things that they do. And so this isn't about just, hi, you've got some solutions, but we're there to partner so that as the food bank implements them and their culture changes, we're able to help them navigate those changes. Rob, Randy, do you want to add to that?
I think that one of the huge benefits that we've seen out of this is not only the mapping and the process work that's gone on, but the ability for Steve and Rob to teach along the way, because these are new concepts for many of the people within the food bank. Myself, I have experience in it, but the engine is only as good as the car that it's in, and if you're not bringing everything around and everybody with you along these changes, they're really not sustainable. So I've appreciated the fact they've taken the time to not only do the mapping and walk us through the process, but explain what that means along the way. And education is a big point that we like to emphasize within the food bank, because we want the people to A, stick around, and also but B, be invested in the processes and the solutions that we develop.
I'd also like to add that having facilitated teams doing strategic planning, doing business process reengineering, doing process improvement, doing a variety of types of work over the years, my greatest frustration is that during those sessions, there's a huge investment of the people and their energy and their minds in coming together and putting something together and developing an ownership around that. And to have that sometimes be then moved to the next, moved out of the room, basically, where that was being worked out. And it goes to leadership, and then that ball just kind of, it stops bouncing. It just rolls over into a corner and sits there. What we found with working with the food bank has been tremendous, because from the start they were ready to make change and to find solutions and to implement those solutions, so that oftentimes solutions were starting to get into the management, were starting to be managed and built before we were even hardly finished with the ink wasn't even dry on it. But just from the start, they've been very receptive to that. But that history, though, of watching it doesn't matter how good the redesign is, if it falls on deaf ears, or if it's not carried through to the next stage, then it's worthless. So that's why I've been so excited to work with Steve on trying to expand that model and carry through what we've started to help nonprofits actually get the benefit of the work that they've invested.
And in our lab, we're working with a combination of students in our organizational performance and workplace learning program. We're also working with graduates from the program who want to play with us as well. Rob, next slide. And so I think the first set of questions here are about the food bank's mission and its challenges. And Randy, if you want to take us, begin answering these.
Absolutely. Well, these are just softball, so I appreciate the softball questions up front. So the mission of the food bank is to feed, educate, and advocate for Idaho's hungry. And what that means really is we use our community partners and our network to help educate the people regarding their individual nutrition needs, how do we connect them with other financial resources, and also how do we help those families and just the overall community become more successful? Because being hungry is a symptom of other social determinants of health. And so we're trying to move, to first feed and then educate those people as to what they can do differently, how they can do it differently, how they can eat more nutritiously, and then how do we advocate for them if it's on a state level, not necessarily from a lobby perspective, but how do we then advocate for them on their behalf, going to find them, other resources that would help them connect the dots in their personal life to help them get away from that food insecure state that they find themselves in. And then greatest constraints to meeting our mission. Well, we could always, it's time, money, effort. We could go through all of those things, but I would say that the greatest constraint to meeting the mission is making sure that we have the right information so we don't have false starts moving forward. So if we start up a program, we've now started piloting programs versus we go statewide and hope it works. So getting the food bank in a position to where we cannot be afraid of change and we cannot be afraid of a false start, but we also do everything we can to plan along the way to avoid those things. And then let's see, I'll read. Some people contend that investments in organizational infrastructure come at the expense of a nonprofit meeting its mission. So I don't believe that investments in infrastructure are at an expense to the nonprofit. I think that they avoid further expense to the nonprofit, honestly. In the food bank, we've done a lot of things, historically in terms of a scarcity mindset. So we do more with less, and we always ask more of people and more volunteer time, and not investing in that infrastructure just means that we're asking more and more along the way, where we can become more efficient as an organization and have those dollars that we do get, we don't spend in inefficiency. We spend it on getting food to where we need to be.
And a little bit about the history and the breadth of the partnership. How has the food bank's strategic partnership with the OPWL department been beneficial for both organizations? You want to start with that, Randy, or do you want me to?
Sure.
Take that?
Yeah, so I can give the history. I've been with the food bank since January of this year. And so the history of the food bank with, OPWL goes back farther than my history. But what I can say is that it's strategic in the fact that it helps define where we're going next. It gives us a better framework for asking questions. We found a boost in that teamwork aspect, especially at the executive leadership level and the director leadership level, where we're asking the right questions early on rather than trying to dig ourselves out of a hole a little bit later. And so we've seen a lot of growth within that aspect of people, people within the organization being able to frame why we want to do something and put some either financial impacts, social impacts behind it, and really gain some additional data. So that's how it's been beneficial for us, because we've also had help with our instructional design in terms of our safety courses as well. So we've spent a lot of time there. Food safety has been impacted. So really across the board, we've seen impacts for the food bank. And I think it's going well because we keep getting asked if we have more things that they'd like to work on. And so, I can't speak to Rob and Steve's experience with that, but that's been mine thus far.
Rob, do you want to answer that too? And then I'll chime in afterwards.
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. From the start, to us, to Steve and I at least, this our work has had dual goals, really. First and foremost is to help nonprofits in Idaho and beyond. Both of us volunteer our time in various ways, and so this was kind of a volunteering approach here, as a way that we can actually work with and apply some more of our skill sets. But the second goal, I think, is also right up there with it, in that we wanted to help develop the consulting and facilitation skills of graduate students and graduates. And that's second. So that's kind of the part where the OPWL department has hopefully been benefiting. I know that a couple of the students, one is a student, one is a graduate who has been working with us quite some time. And we've now just expanded out with another about 15 people and kind of moving into a new phase of our work here, of helping people learn the consulting business more about facilitation, more about project management as we introduce agile project management concepts as we're doing further work. So, and we'd like to help to roll out those new ideas and those new techniques to our nonprofit partners as we go in the future. Steve?
This relationship started a number of years ago when one of our graduates joined the leadership team of the food bank. And because she's one of our graduates, she was talking with their director of warehouse safety and food safety. And the topic came up of, well, maybe we need a needs assessment. And so Boise, our classes in instructional design, needs assessment, and evaluation are all project-based. So our student teams work with real projects, real clients. They're responsible for doing real work. And we did two initial needs assessments, one on warehouse safety, one on food safety. And in both of those needs assessments, we turned up causes of performance gaps that dealt with a lack of adequate processes, a lack of adequate guidance in the workplace, and a lack of adequate skills. And so we realized that there's the basis of a nice long-term relationship here. And so we started, these started as class projects, and then over time, they became the first process improvement effort that we completed. Until recently, it's been Rob and I and a colleague Rob brought in with IT chops, and a grad student and a graduate. And now we're ramping up and we've got about 15, a mix of half and half students and graduates. And this semester, we're learning how to use Agile project management to create a variety of learning objects for new lab associates to come up to speed, but also objects we can share with clients so that when they come into their first process improvement workshop, they have a better sense of what's going on as, you know, something different than, hi, we're Steve, Rob, trust us. And so this has been a marvelous place because it's been really, we operate under the guidelines of everyone has to win. And so it's been good for the food bank, it's been good for our department, it's been good for our students, it's been good for the community, it's been good for the university, which is really neat. And the other thing that's marvelous about this partnership is I was a management consultant for 20 odd years before coming to Boise State.
Here for me.
Once at Boise State in all these project-based courses, I support teams as their back pocket consultant. And in consulting work, you have to often accept the clients that you have. And what's really marvelous about this relationship is that we've got really amazing clients who are really engaged, who have an organization where people are passionate about what they do and leadership that gets it. And we're really lucky to be able to play in this space. Next slide. In terms of the overall process improvement goals, Randy, do you want to tackle these?
Sure. I'll focus on a most recent effort because that's the one that I have the privilege of being the project, I guess the project owner and the process owner for. Really what we were after was we had expiring foods that would come through government programs, and we wanted to reduce and eliminate the expired food that we had coming through. And really it was based on lack of expiration date management and ownership within the organization. But as we've quickly found out, there were so many little pieces and parts that were touched by different parts of the organization. We quickly expanded that goal to being really, let's understand what we're doing, because there's not one person that could sit down and talk about each little piece in its entirety for the whole process. We had to actually bring a group together to understand what it looked like. So really that's where, you know, our first goal was, what are we doing? And then the second goal was, now let's stop doing the expired foods. From there, we've already seen, so we used to have, we had roughly about $93,000 worth of expired food, which that's horrible from any environment. And spoilage happens, of course, but we were looking to eliminate that. We've gotten that down. So in the last 4 months, we have had roughly $250 worth of food that is expired. So tremendous improvement along those lines. But not only that, I didn't like having a goal of let's not have any expired foods. I wanted to get into how do we manage this as a process so we order the right foods and so we know they won't expire in terms of our supply and demand side. So it kicked off a lot of capacity analysis. So really that's where it started, was, you know, the problem was expired foods. And really what it got down to is we didn't have a complete map and we didn't have control of our inputs into that system, was creating a lot of problems. And, you know, depending on who you ask, you know, from the second question there, depending on who you ask within the organization, a lot of times that changes the goal. And we didn't have that problem. We all had the same goal. And I think the scope was appropriate for what we needed to do. And we also had the benefit of, you know, everyone being on board with that was the mission. We knew every dollar that goes to waste is a dollar that can't be spent on food. And so having people aligned around that was I guess it was very empowering. People didn't hold back in terms of what could be improved upon there.
And we started doing workshops, and you've been part of several We're interested in participant reactions. What was the word on the floor when this was first announced, and how did people feel as they completed the workshops?
Oh, that's a loaded question. So when I first got here, I'd say it was mixed reviews, just from because there wasn't necessarily an owner of the different processes. And so at first it was, oh, more time that I don't have. You know, it's usually where it starts off, is they don't understand what the goals are, why you're meeting. And so they think it's just another thing they're doing rather than a change in the way they're doing things. And so I would say that now we have people requesting process mapping because they see it as a tool. And so we're doing some of our own internal that I lead as well, but it's based off the same principles. You know, we're tackling a few smaller subsets of bigger projects, but the fact that it went from, you know, the, oh no, and I don't have time, and, you know, do I really have to attend, to, you know, can we do this because I'm sick of wasting my time on this process? And so I think we could learn something better. So that's been, I think, kind of the evolution. And I think that more importantly was the reaction from the executive leadership team, because you can have everybody within the organization wanting something, but if it's not supported from an executive standpoint, and the willingness to change an executive standpoint, then it's going to fail because it won't get the resources it needs to move forward. That's been great in terms of having that engagement of the executive leadership team. So it's not just me going and asking them to do these things. We have across the board groups looking to do this. And so I think that's what's been more motivating, because we see that our future can be so bright on the other side of that. And then how did people feel as they completed the workshops? A little exhausted because there's a lot of information that goes on in, you know, roughly 4 days that we accomplished this. And I think that what happened is that they felt a sense of relief too, though, that they finally they had a way to describe and to display what they were feeling and, you know, what they were doing on a daily basis that may have been wasted time. Also, we had the ability for people to sit in a room and hear why what they're doing matters to the next person. And so to realize where you are within that chain of events was very, you know, it compelled people to ask more questions. It built a little bit more teamwork behind the scenes. And then relationship between leadership and process leads. I would say that has been, it's been a change in dynamics that, you know, we have an open door policy, you know, which means that at any time, any employee can just burst into your office whenever they want to. But now it's hey, I'd like you to come see this. They don't spend their time talking about what's going on. They want you to come see it so they can explain it and show you. And then that's where, you know, there's not that, you know, afraid to come to leadership and ask for their assistance, or feel like it's theirs to solve in the background.
If I may, I'd like to add one other piece to that. One of the downstream pieces that we've added to most of the processes is where after the workshops have occurred, we've issued the report, then we've worked with the lead. Usually it's the team lead to put together a presentation of the major changes, the problems that they've tackled, and the major solutions or changes that they want to put in place. Usually it's just we're talking about the top 4 or 5 or 6 changes that they want to go forward with. But it's a way of putting that together into a PowerPoint that they present to the leadership group to walk through that. So we work with the lead, and to the extent that they want or need some coaching, we do that. We help them put together that presentation. So from one team to the next, the leadership has been been receiving a kind of a consistent format and a way to examine what has been done. So,
Yeah, and
I don't know.
I'd say as well that just from an engagement standpoint, we even have our board of directors asking how this is going. You know, for the board to be wondering what you're doing on a daily basis is unusual, sometimes scary, but they're asking for, you know, updates as to how it's going, what's next. You know, they know it's an investment of our time and our energy, and they're looking forward to it.
Want to go to the next slide? And we've already been hinting at some of the impact. And here it's just a range of questions about what kinds of solutions have been implemented, what help do people need, how are the solutions working? Do you want to circle back on that, Randy?
Sure. So solutions that have been implemented, there's been a lot more, I guess, succinct communication, and we've had a focus on metrics. And so that's a generalized statement, but there's a lot of processes that have been impacted. So we've had, you know, key initiatives behind our receiving error reduction. So we've achieved, you know, and we're set to achieve a 30% reduction in receiving errors, which that getting an error out of the way at the beginning certainly helps the rest of the process. And then also we've had, you know, as I mentioned before, the metrics around expired goods that we've had too. So they've needed a bit of help in getting rid of their fear of failure. So they'd rather not start because they don't know if it'll go well. So we've been actively promoting some changes there, as long as they're a controlled environment where we can judge whether or not in a month they've been successful, and we can change course if needed. So that's how it's been working. I think it alleviated some anxiety behind change in general. Because we have some employees that have worked here for 23 years. You know, the way it is the way it is. So now those are the guys asking, you know, if we could do something a little differently, or if we could standardize what they're doing because they see that it's not the same across the board. So that's where they've needed some assistance, is more on the tools. They know an idea, but they don't know what tool to use in that process. So we've had some success there in working with them on just that education standpoint. You know, behind what mechanisms we put in place, the biggest thing is that every 2 weeks we have a different basically change owner, or, you know, we have the different changes that are recommended from the process improvement workshops. We have them present at the leadership meeting, so they can say where they're at, where they need help, what have you. And then beyond that, I saw a kind of a structure deficiency maybe within the food bank in terms of filtering projects through and getting an understanding of how projects should be managed or changes should be managed within the organization. So we've set up basically a clearinghouse for those, and we're doing project evaluations and feasibility prior to you know, getting approval. So we've added a little bit more of that, you know, stage gate management piece to our overall projects. And, you know, I think that the efforts that it's produced is, we're using our time more wisely. We haven't, you know, we've been able to be as successful as possible in a hard time to hire. So we have a lot of CDL drivers. If anybody's aware, supply chain side, we're, you know, tremendously short nationwide in terms of CDL drivers. So we've been able to kind of weather this storm this far, and because we're becoming more efficient as an organization. So it's led to a lot more employee engagement, less turnover in my mind. We'll wait for some of those metrics to come forward. But in a warehouse environment and driver environment, to lose one person over the course of 8 months during this time I think speaks volumes to where we're at in terms of employee engagement. We've addressed pay inconsistencies there too, which has been helpful. But I think overall they're able to have these conversations and it's broken down that wall. We call it the carpet to concrete mentality. So, you know, how do you get from the warehouse into the upper offices? And we're trying to break down those barriers.
And there are a host of solutions that have been implemented to date. The process management lab works with Rob's consulting firm, Hot Rocks Consulting. And some of the solutions that we've implemented have been, providing final reports, working with the process leads to help them tailor those presentations to leadership. Some of these process leads had never really spoken with leadership before. And so we were coaching them not only in terms of preparing the presentation, but how do you present, and practicing the presentation with them, which is nice because now they're able to do that on their own. At the food bank, there have been a host of other implemented solutions. One was they not only hired Randy as the chief operating officer, and you can see he's a chief operating officer coming in with the operations side, but also the change management side. But the food bank also hired a project manager. Randy, do you want to talk about how that's been working?
Yeah, so typically this was a piece of infrastructure that we didn't want to invest in, from a scarcity mentality. And I'm not talking again, I didn't write these slides, so I didn't put hiring me as a benefit. But Carla Hoffman was brought on as a project manager. That role is considered usually something that's outsourced, right? When you think in terms of project management, it's project by project basis. But where she's really helped assist that is that she is formally trained in project management. She's got her PMP. This is an investment that is not, usually a part of something that a food bank does in terms of that. So it was a tremendous investment, great hire. She's very diligent about what she does, but it allows us to hold we hold the keys to all of our projects that are going on. And then she's managing that piece. And really I'd call her more of a program manager than necessarily a project manager, because she's looking across the organization. So, we've hired, we've also, along with Carla, we've now created some processes that are more robust and real-time updated. And so inbound food deliveries, that's really about our receiving log. Sounds archaic, but in food banking, there's a lot of manual processes. We're yet to have, and I'll give kind of examples that we move 30 million pounds of food in a year. And we do that without any barcode scanner, without any warehouse management system. So we do a tremendous amount manually, but we're trying to make those moves. And so we're getting more of we have all of our inbounds being tracked. We know what's missing from an appointment standpoint now, where we didn't before. And so it's laid the foundation to be able to standardize these processes, to go find the right software solution rather than find a software solution and hope it comes with your right process, which that never happens, right? So, and now we're doing all that, but we've incorporated all of this tracking into the strategic business side. So we do business planning every year, and a big part of that is metrics. And no longer is it like, will it be improve 1 or 2 processes this year? It's reduce errors by X. It's, we're having that focus on a metric driven environment and turning our data into real information. And that's been a part of our strategic planning that we're going through right now. And then, foundation wise, we have our ERP system is Series. And so that's a software system for food banks. It's used by Feeding America, and Feeding America promotes it across the United States. But we've upgraded our Series software, and to put it in perspective, we had Series 2009 and that was the last time it was updated. I don't know, that's about the time the iPhones became popular. And so, and now we just upgraded a series 5.1. We actually went from the laggard in terms of adoption of new series software to now we're one of 4 that has the newest version. And now we're looking at what can we do on the barcoding side, on warehouse management, that builds off this, the best in-house ERP system, and we can start to become even more efficient as we go through.
Next, in progress, there's some things going on. We've talked about different ways of supporting change management support. One of the other things that we've noticed happening is our instructional design class is still working with the person who's responsible for warehouse and food safety. And what we noticed is that she had written SOPs, and SOPs were focused on compliance, and they passed muster with the auditors. That's a good thing. But like other SOPs, they were written for the compliance auditor, and they weren't written for as an SOP as something that represented what is it that we actually do. What really is the workflow, step by step, decision by decision. And so in our instructional design course, we have our students for a given job task, complete a task analysis that gets appended now to the compliance specific SOP. Our students create job aids because most of these tasks are things that are performed infrequently, or they're performed by volunteers. They're not things that we need to train to recall. And so also staple to that SOP are the job aids. We're creating training and assessments, and the food bank can use those assessments. So when these people return back to their jobs, their supervisor can use the assessments to provide feedback and ensure accountability. And in our workshops, every time now we bring up the notion of this really is a skill deficit, we really do need training. We always bundle that conversation with how are we going to ensure the transfer of that training and accountability in the workplace. Next steps, work continues. Randy, are there some next steps that you can add or illuminate here?
Yeah, so we actually, our next steps has been on, the capacity side. And when I say capacity, we're working on what our overall statewide capacity to distribute by different channel is. And so that's the next steps that we have, is that I have the forecasting side that I'm working on independent of Steve and Rob. But once we have that forecast built out, there's going to be problems when we look at what's our ability to expand. And so that's the next steps from our standpoint, is to look at where we see a discrepancy in expansion. What does that mean in terms of how many trucks we need, different hubs that are potential as well. So that's really where we're expanding from that standpoint.
And from our standpoint at the process management lab, we've seen how this is really, it's not only been a lot of fun, and it's really neat to help the food bank and help the community. This has also been a really good place for the people who've been working with us. So one of our graduate students is going to be doing her portfolio review here in a few weeks. She was able to take the work that she'd been doing with the lab and went to Boise State and landed a job at our Office of Continuous Improvement. Another graduate who's been working with us was interested in starting his own consulting firm. And he's successfully put together the materials to describe that. And in describing that, he's used those materials to land a job with a different employer. we're finding out that our students are working together. So as one of our colleagues is preparing for her portfolio review, she's doing mock sessions with the graduate student and with another student who's now working with us. And we want to see those relationships continue. We're now ramping up in scale. And for us, that's going to be interesting because we know how to work as a small little 4 or 5 person concern, where all of us are involved in each one of these process improvement workshops. And we're working with only one client. Now we're looking at tackling problems of scale. We're looking at finding, maintaining our relationship with food bank, but also finding another client or two and figuring out how to scale up these operations in ways where more students can get these experiences. Some of them are ID experiences as we create objects to ramp up associates in the lab. We have other students now working on creating a marketing capacity for the lab. And we're going to have to figure out how to take these workshops and be able to support more than one small team doing one small workshop at a time. And life is full of problems. Some problems are bad to have, and these are great problems to have. Rob, are there other next steps in there that you want to add? Oh, you're muted.
I can't think of anything. You've really covered it well. As you say, we just really expanded out with to 15 people that we now have involved and are working on various projects to develop learning modules and other things. And so we're hoping that some of those folks then will be able to start kind of training into the process improvement, and some will also be able to kind of move into other aspects of an operation that to support more downstream processing work. So we'll see.
And we're using Agile to create those assets. I took an Agile Scrum Master course and was certified a long time ago, but had never really done it. Rob has a lot more Agile chops than I do. Our students have heard about it, and now we have a risk-free place to practice it, and we're using it to create those objects. And we're just getting started. We had our initial sprint planning meetings on Monday, and we have people who've never been Scrum Masters before being Scrum Masters. We have people who've never been part of an Agile team being part of the team. And everybody knows that nobody has really tried to do something like this. The closest thing that I can think of was Jennifer Madrell from Old Dominion had the ID for Good movement, where IDs volunteered their time to work on projects creating adult basic education. And that inspired me, and that inspired Rob a lot. And so we have our spin on it. We openly tell people that we are figuring this out as we go along. We're building the plane as we fly it. And we're doing this in ways where the rule is everyone benefits. And so far, we've been able to make this work, and we're able to make this work largely with clients, such as our great colleagues at the food bank. This is a choreography, this is a dance. And unless you have that client-side sponsorship, and they are with it, and they are engaged, and they are passionate, and they are smart, these things don't work. And so we're very fortunate to have this relationship and to be able to do these kinds of things. As we're coming down the home stretch, future directions. Randy, where do you see this partnership moving over time?
I You're asking me to commit now, aren't you? I like this. This is
As well as being recorded.
yes, exactly. Well, I do see it. I do see it expanding in terms of the number of processes. I also see I guess that the training program expanding into how to do these mapping exercises in-house too, because that's what I would ultimately like to see, is where we now own the keys to our own future. And so that involves a lot of training. But that's where I see that happening is as we get more and more employees engaged in this, we're getting more and more of them empowered and educated to become the standard way we do things, and building that operating system of the food bank.
That's great. I like to hear that. Actually, we have not rehearsed this beforehand, everybody. So
No.
because I mean, what some of these learning objects we're putting together are around that exactly.
Mm-hmm.
How do we teach how to facilitate these the mapping processes, and the kind of the steps of moving through in an orderly way through the maps, through the identifying the problems, the solutions, winnowing them down, and coming up with your set of implementation plans. So that's what we're starting to develop right now with these folks. So, and we'd love to be able to, roll them out with you. So.
Yeah. And I think Janine just had a comment, so thank you. I'm glad it was inspiring to you from that standpoint. And so.
Yeah, Janine said, as an EDD student at UWF, this was so inspiring to me to see how far our work can go to contribute positively to the world. Thank you. Yeah. Rob, our next slide. I think we're at the point where you've been patiently listening to us talk on and on and on and on. Are there questions and comments that you have? Please feel free to use the chat or here in the room for comments.
I do have a couple of questions.
You'll have to speak loud because the owl.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Yes.
I do have a question regarding, I see this is definitely a win-win situation. And like I said, I agree with you, important to have the buy-in from the client, and which is not always the case. Just wondering, collaborating with different stakeholders, with different participants, did you encounter any challenges on the design process specifically when you do the planning, when you do the redefine the process, needs assessment, and implement the design? What kind of challenges did you encounter, especially involving, instructional design analysis? Graduate students, you have to adequate onboard as you go, right?
Well, there are two ways. The question is, what kind of challenges did we encounter as we were doing this? And so there's one set of challenges that relate to the process improvement efforts. Another set of challenges that relate to the other relationship our OPWL department has with the food bank related to doing needs assessments and instructional design projects. In terms of the process management side, this has all been very straightforward, and the challenges were things we could easily identify and negotiate. A lot of them were about how to support more about the implementation after the workshop. So we knew how to support people who were used to being a department lead, but had never taken solutions their group had come up with and presented those to management. Those were things that we were able to address very easily because we've got this great relationship with the client. And as these things come up, we realize that these efforts always have a making things up as you go along element, and we just communicate and work them as we go along. Randy, do you want to add anything to that? Rob?
I would love to add to that. So I think you're being very, very humble. There was other considerations that occurred over this last, 2 years now, nearly, in terms of the need to go virtual in a setting that's typically done in person. And so when you look at the tools that we were using to enable people from across the state to stay in their office and participate in a workshop that's designed around process mapping, that was something that I had not gone through before. Typically mine have all been in person. You travel in from all over the United States and you have to meet because this is important, where now it's virtual. And so being able to navigate that side, to have everyone contribute, keep everyone engaged, have good ground rules in terms of the meetings. I think starting it off in that kind of a key organized fashion and having tools that work for a virtual setting was extremely important to the success of the overall projects.
Yeah, when our first process management workshop was in person. And, we were in the meeting room and we had Post-it notes and stickies and markers. And yeah, I'm seeing the nods, you know how this works. Then came COVID. So Rob and our colleague Jody and I spent a summer trying to figure out how to do this virtually. We had Zoom, and Zoom was a given because Boise State provides it for us. We did a trade study looking at mural and Miro and Lucid Art. And our test case was making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with the idea that first you're doing it at home and then you have to ramp up the project or ramp up your peanut butter and jelly making efforts for a group of 150 people. And we knew how we wanted to facilitate the workshop, and we played around and played until we made a decision to use Mural. The neatest thing that we've seen happen is when we were doing it in person, those people in Lewiston at the north of the state, or those people in Pocatello, way east of Boise, were supposedly participating, and I do use the air quotes intentionally, using over the phone, but they weren't in the room and they couldn't see what was being done. We try to supplement that by taking cell phone pictures, etc. But essentially, they knew they were second-class citizens. And the neat thing about this virtual approach now is everybody is there and everybody has equal access. And so that's been one challenge. The other challenge was in terms of the ID components. And the quick answer to that is we have a long-standing partnership now. And over time, what's nice is you try something, it's action research, right? It doesn't quite work the way you want, you tweak it, you modify it. And our client has worked with numerous student teams now. When COVID hit, we were really in a jam. We needed 8 different projects. And the rest of our nonprofit partners, we have like 4 others, were discombobulated. And she was able to stand up projects for all of those teams. And so over time, her project management sophistication has grown. She'd never worked with vendors or students before. Over time, we built more project management scaffolding into the project so that we're helping our students interact with their clients. We found a sweet spot in terms of project complexity. We're looking primarily in our ID courses at mission critical projects that are beholden to tribal lore. They're largely trapped in somebody's head. And they're things that have to be performed the same way each time. And they're complex enough that people have to practice them and get some feedback in order to do them. That's worked really well. Now, we know that there are other training needs that we can meet with the job aid, but the training is going to have to be more complex. There's one person in the organization that prepares government reports, and we're working to create training in support of that. So, this is not a mission critical capability that only one person in the organization possesses. We also know that parts of this task are things that align really well with our course. But there's a magic there where he's collected data, he's starting to review and analyze it. And then there's this magic box about what you do to reconcile things that don't match. That training is going to have to be a lot more complex than what we address in an introductory course to instructional design. But with the process management lab, what's really neat is we can stand that up as another project and have a team work on that and support that outside of a class environment and outside of the burdens of a traditional online course. We stand that up as colleagues working together to support our client. So we're really excited about that. We've gone on a little long. I know that there are other sessions. I'm happy to stay if anyone's interested. Again, wanted to thank you for your interest in our work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you all much. I think this is the end. I'll be looking at getting the recording for this so we can leverage this. And I'll be following up with both of you. Randy, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Randy.
Rob, always a pleasure.
Yeah. Oh, don't end it with lies. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will close.